Hey everybody, it's Michael Antonio, and welcome to Tales from the Code Mines. In this series, I'll be telling stories from my 35-year career at Anderson Consulting, now called Accenture, Microsoft, and Amazon. Today, graphics with Dr. Alvy Ray Smith. I was in the same team as Alvy Ray Smith for over a year before I got the opportunity to work with him directly. Alvy was a legend. He had co-founded Pixar and had 2 technical Oscars for his computer graphics work there. Then he founded Altamira, which was purchased by Bill Gates. Bill at the time was desperate to prove to the world that Windows NT was a real operating system that could handle serious graphics. Bill understood even then that Microsoft had to get into games and that graphics was the necessary foundational work. Alvy was the first graphics fellow at Microsoft, and soon Alvy, Jim Blinn, and many other of the graphics gods were working at Microsoft. Bill hired them like Citizen Charlie Kane, poaching the talent of his rival newspapers for his beloved Inquirer. Xbox was the beneficiary of their work. Now, Alvy had written a series of seminal graphics papers, and I and the team read them all. He and the other graphics gods gave lectures, and we all attended, eager to soak up their wisdom. Alvy taught us things like a pixel is not a little square. It's a sample, and a little square is but one possible rendering of that sample. He had an impressive sense of the fundamentals of computer graphics and how graphics interacted with the human optic system. I had a feature to rasterize vector image for our graph-based imaging engine. Microsoft had an existing library of vector art that was shipped as part of the Office Art package. But in order to integrate those vectors in a graph-based imaging framework, they had to be rasterized, which would then allow us to use Photoshop graphics filters with the rendered vector images. I was having difficulty with the rasterizer code, and so I asked my manager for help. He said, "That's an Alvy question. That's why he's here. Go ask Alvy." I went down the hall, and Alvy quickly talked me through the memory constraints I was up against, how to partition the image for processing, how to handle partition boundaries, how to name the indices to reduce my confusion, and how to implement a simple convolution to average the pixels together and create a smooth vector with alpha channel outlines that rendered beautifully. But honestly, we spent most of the time talking about his Oscars. They were right there on his desk, and they were so beautiful, I just had to ask. These were way more impressive than the piles of cubes that most of us had for software patents we had worked on. These were heaped up like so many nuggets pulled from the code mines of this new gold rush we had all moved west to be a part of. Here's my pile. Alvy wasn't proud of the Oscars so much as he was proud of the picture of him receiving the Oscars from Ashley Judd. Ashley had the honor of handing out the technical Oscars that year when Alvy won his. And Alvy had the biggest smile on his face, standing there with his team and his wife and Ashley Judd. Alvy deserved those Oscars. Alvy had written the definitive paper on pixel composition. These were the days before floating point coprocessors and GPUs, so all graphics work had to be done on the CPU itself. The early CPUs were 8-bit and thus could only process one color channel at a time, red, green, or blue. Alvy's paper used a Taylor series approximation for compositing a source color channel with an alpha channel and a target image. Alvy's C macros used bitwise operations to implement the approximation, and he provided a mathematical proof that for every source, target, an alpha value from 0 to 255, his macros would give the correct answer. It was elegant and highly performant for the day. Years later, I was visiting my friend Doug in the hospital, and John Marvin, the head of Microsoft Geography, was also visiting that day. Doug looked at us and said, "John, you're looking for a developer. And Michael, looking for a job. You two should talk." That's how I ended up working for Microsoft Geography. Geography has graphics, so it was a natural fit. I developed the MapPoint SDK for Visual Studio, among other features. After a few releases, John wanted to create a version of our Maps application for Windows CE. This was a pre-iPhone mobile operating system. Users would create routes on their desktop computer using Microsoft MapPoint or Streets and Trips, then upload those routes to their Windows CE device and navigate on the road using the pre-planned route. SOAP-based web services were still a few years in the future for us, so there was no web-based routing yet. The big enabling feature for CE maps was route highlighting. In the desktop environment, we were able to achieve this using the fancy floating point coprocessors available on 32-bit desktops. The FPU was built right into the chip on our minimum required hardware. What a luxury! In the pre-GPU days, the FPU made compositing operations fast. Windows CE, however, didn't have an FPU, so our existing compositing code couldn't work there. John told me he didn't know how we were going to implement this feature. For now, they had implemented an opaque route highlight that frequently covered the names of the highlighted streets because, of course, it was drawn over the map tiles. The highlight toggled on and off, and it stayed the same width regardless of zoom, so it couldn't be baked into the map tiles. I recommended using Alvy's Taylor series approximation, and John asked me to implement a demo for the CE app. Alvy's C macros worked great, producing smoothly scrolling highlighted maps with settable color and width. I updated the code to use C++ templates to fit the rubric of the times. Well, that's it for this time. Let me know what you think of this series in the comments, so please like and subscribe. Thanks a lot, everybody. Bye-bye.